And the pre-show is live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 15 minutes for the actual show to start. In the meantime, I shall type in things into the chat and change things on my website. Wasn't prepared for that. I only do it every single time. So, of course, how can I not be prepared? Well, that's a story unto itself. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone who's joining live. Let me find the settings for the bar at the top of my site. Get that? This is Wednesday, right? We are doing this on the right day and time, are we not? Okay. This is right now. Click here to join us. And let's click over to the live link. Live. Reset the cookie. And save the changes. And how about we clear the cache? Empty all caches. So now our caches are empty. Well, that's it. Now it's just a matter of waiting and watching and for all of this to happen, isn't it? Is it not? I guess we could start recording some things. That might be good. Oh, that isn't going to record because I don't have any disk space. Should probably clear up some disk space on there. That'll give me something to do. I have plenty of space down here on the SSDs. I apparently have run out of space on my TriCaster. So let's see if we can quickly clear some out. I think I have some space. How can I do this easily without leaving the stream? Let's find out, shall we? Here we go. You can't really see this on your screen, but maybe I'll be able to make this happen. Let's browse. Nice. Nice. And let's find, it's only going to show media files. That's okay. Media files is all right. What dates are these? Boy, these are big. We can clear up plenty of room here. What dates? We're in March, aren't we? I do not need to keep stuff from January. Or really from February. But let's just clear out January. Shift delete on Windows permanently deletes. That clears out E. Let's clear out something on D. What? Oh, yeah. We have no space on D, folks. D is full. But we knew that already, right? Where would this be? Probably under study group. It's probably a saved capture. Indeed it is. We don't need anything from February. That will clear out a good 250 gig. And that is now cleared. Why is it only showing 95 gig free? That's a thing. Let's try that again. Oh, you know what I could clear out? I could clear out my courses. Under media. It'd be a clip. Let's go to our capture. Oh, we already cleared it out. So let's go to study group and capture. Isn't this fun, everyone? Aren't we having a great time with this? It did clear it out. So why is it not showing it? Why, Windows? Why? Because 95 gig just is not enough. It's not enough to do what I want to do. Well, let's clear out some more then. This would be study group. Isn't this gripping? Let's clear out the other ones. Let's clear out the ones from the second. Probably because that one was about that big. That's another 100 gig. So that should certainly, how much are we up to now? Oh, yeah, 188. So watch now. This light should stay on, and it does. Fantastic. All right. All right. Is nobody in the live event chat yet? I don't see anybody in there. Or I didn't turn it on properly. It's one of those things. It's either one thing or the other. Is anybody in Socrative yet? Yes, you're in Socrative. See? I could do this by myself. It's painfully boring when I do. Let's get the iPad up and running. Can probably give it power. Let's go to the keynote. No iPad. I don't want to play Sudoku right now. I want to do work. Gives me some nice suggestions. Why don't you play some Sudoku? Well, that's a great idea. iPad, why don't I do that? All right. See, the chat room is there. Hello, chat room. Ba, 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 da, 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 da. My struggles today have been many and varied. Had to get coffee made. It's the time change, people. It's the time change. It has never, never gone well for anybody, ever, in the history of anything. The only people it's really gone well for are the farmers. That's the only people it's gone well for. And I think we just continue to let it ride because we feel for them. Which I guess is legit. There's fewer of them these days, though. I think they'd be able to just suck it up, work at night, work in the dark. Why are we so messed up about that? These people have to get outside and do work. Of course we want them to have light. Just none of us are happy about it. I have not adjusted. It'll be a week. It'll be a week. It's like I'm traveling overseas or something. It was a 1 hour change. How hard is this? And yet, okay. So, how are you? How's the family? We're doing pretty good. If you're watching this in a replay, we'll be starting in about 8 minutes. 8 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. 8 minutes. Study group content looks good. You know what I could do is get some extra questions loaded up. I believe I will. What do you think of that? You can't stop me. Hopefully it's been a good week for everyone, even with all of this crazy that's going on with the time change. Maybe I'm the only one that has this kind of a problem. Maybe it's just me. Let's export that. Let's, boy, that's a big one. All right, good. You know what? I pulled up the wrong database, I think. That was the wrong database. It was. So I have a big database full of things I don't care about. Makes a big difference when you get the right database. There we go. What a difference. Now, did we open up the old database? We did. Off it goes. Good day to you, sir. And the new one. Nice. Nice. Let's do some sorting. Let's sort the huge monster spreadsheet. And is it sorted? It is. Did I sort in the wrong direction? Oh, it's a big database. There's a lot of stuff in there. The sorting is weird. It's a weird sort. Let's do the sort again. Let's go A to Z. So it's just wrong regardless. Regardless, the database is wrong. It's one of those where it's never going to be quite right. But that's okay. That's all right. Let's just hide things up. There's plenty of good questions in there. And we need to make this a little bit bigger because I can't see it. The screen's too big. We'll stick it over there for now. Where can we put the database? Let's put it up there. Yeah. Don't you love it when it's 2 o'clock and all of a sudden it's 3 o'clock? You watch it go click. That's a thing. I don't really recommend that. Not my favorite one. I love it. Tony asked the question about the certified ethical hacker. You'll have to watch the end of last week's as I go on my little tirade about what awful people they are and then say the test is fine. I gave you a mixed message, sort of intentional. No, I've not ever taken or studied for the CEH because I will never in my lifetime ever give them my personal information. And if you'd like to know why, you can Google that one. Google security breach certified ethical hacker. That should take care of it for you. But the shortcut is I like the content that's on it. I just don't like who gives it, which I think is legitimate. I think it's fine. Let's check cameras, shall we? There's a camera. There's a camera. Here's a camera. There's another camera. Here's a camera with a thing on it. Hey, it all works, peoples. Nice. No, I don't have my CISSP either. I was never in a position where I needed it. I probably should have gotten it, but by the time I got it, I was already doing a company-specific certification. So I'd already gotten my Palo Alto Networks certification, for example. Their certified network expert, or whatever they're calling it. It's Socrative.com, the room name Professor Messer. Socrative. Probably have a page of that. In fact, I could probably put up the page without me being on it. Here we go. You could follow along on Socrative.com. I should have one of these slideshows that goes on, before the movie starts that has all of these things on it. I've said this before. I've done nothing towards doing that. I've done zero work towards actually making that happen. But what are you going to do? We are on 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Make sure you put in the right room name, Professor Messer, all one word. Spell it Professormesser, as they say in the chat room, all one word. I guess all one word. If you separate it, will it still work? It's a good question. They really should. I mean, if they don't allow spaces and you end up putting spaces in it, it would be nice if they truncated the spaces and processed it that way. But who am I to make these decisions about user interface and all of that nonsense? Oh, that's right. I'm a user. That'd be a great idea. La la la. Hope these questions work out. You guys sent me some interesting ones this week. So we will see how these go with the pieces on the thing. Should be interesting. Okay, tweet has gone out. Did the Facebook, what we didn't check is audio, although none of you have been telling me that it was just been awful. So it may be just fine for that. Let's check on the YouTube site, on the YouTuber, and see if it says anything interesting. Is the pot on? It is. Live streaming and events. And here's the event. I'm live now. Look at that. Who knew? Let's see how it sounds, though. Interesting. Is the pot on? It is. See? Live. All right. I'm fine with that. The potentiometer. The pot. It's really not a pot because it does not work. I guess probably it is. Maybe underneath the surface. It's all digital on this board, though. Although you see these little dials and sliders and buttons, it's really just a digital input to the audio system. I could go to a web page and control it just as easily. I guess that's it. Did it actually hit Facebook this time? That's always a thing. If it actually made its way through the Facebook API, it actually did. Yay! Yay! Da, 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 da. Ba, ba, ba. Let's see. So we might actually do this thing. All right. 11:59:18. Where's my horrible tasting cinnamon spray? Here it is. Oh, that's bad. If anybody needs a fantastic spray, if you're a singer or a speaker, it's Singers Saving Grace. Singers Saving Grace. This is soothing throat spray, and I'm using Serious Cinnamon. Serious Cinnamon. And it is serious. It tastes awful. But it's all natural, and it really helps the voice, which is the important part. So let's do a study group, shall we? Are we recording? Yep. We see Cylons down here, so we must be recording. And let's do a show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2016 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. This is our monthly study group where I ask you questions. I bang stuff around so you hear it in the microphone, and hopefully I get answers from you as well. As you can tell, I'm already knocking things over before we've even started. For those of you in the United States, we had our clocks change this past weekend. So I've been mentioning in the pre-show that I'm all out of sorts, which means it's going to be a great show. What could be better than me not knowing what in the world's going on around me? I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to go online and answer the question. Now, if you're watching this on the replay, I'm very sorry, but it won't work for you. You have to be here live to be able to interactively answer these questions. But if you are here live, you can do that. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I also have a chat room that's on my website at professormesser.com/live, where I'm watching the chat go by and folks making fun of me not shaving. So that's good. I have that going for me. There's a whole thing going on at home about this. We can go into that in the after show. Also, if you're watching this live, I'll have phone lines that will be opening in the second hour of this. So the first hour, I usually ask you a lot of questions. And in the second hour, we go through a lot of other things as well. Well, I'm able to do this monthly study group because of you. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for watching my videos online, because all of my Security Plus videos are available to watch for absolutely free online. There's no registration. There's no doors. There's no barriers. There's no paywall. You can just go online and do that. Now, there is also an offline version of this that you can purchase. So if you're someone who likes to take this when you're not connected to the internet, there's one of those for you as well. I also can provide you and sell the MP3 files, so you can take these on your journey into work and back while you're sitting in traffic. You might actually be learning something. And of course, the course notes, which I'll talk about later on in this presentation. Now, I did mention that you'll be able to answer the questions as I'm asking them, and I'm able to do this through this amazing service called Socrative. So if you go to pop open a new window or use your mobile device to load the student app for Socrative, you will be able to participate. You'll see the questions pop up on your mobile device or on your browser window, and you can simply choose what the answer might be. You can find this at Socrative.com, and you want to go to the student login and go to the room named Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So there is a little bit of typing you'll have to do, but once you type that, you'll be able to get to that screen, and you'll see something like this that asks, how long have you been studying for your Security Plus certification? And then you can answer. In fact, 57% of you have been studying for less than 3 months. And you can see that 11%, like me, already have your Security Plus certification. Although if I was studying for this, I would be an E over a year, the 6% of you that have been doing this for a while. So that gives you a chance to go through, answer the question, see if you're able to participate, make sure that's working for you, because I will be putting up a new question. All you have to do is stay right there on that page, and I will very easily provide you with what the next piece of this is going to be. One of the things you need to know about Security Plus also is that Security Plus is it's been around for a bit of time. We're sort of in the midpoint, maybe the second half of the Security Plus, the current version of the Security Plus lifetime. There is this current version, the SY0401, has been out since April of 2014. So we're really coming up on a couple of years that this particular version has been out. We expect probably a new release to be a year after that. So if you're studying for your Security Plus, and if you're watching this live, you have plenty of time to take your Security Plus certification. If you're someone who is watching this on a replay, check your calendar, see when the next version comes out. Even when the new version is released, there will still be 6 to 9 months that CompTIA has traditionally given as an overlap. So we still may see the 401 around for quite some time. It's a single exam that you take, 90 questions maximum. You could get fewer than this. It depends on what they decide to ask you on any particular day. And you need to get a 750 between a range of 100 to 900. I know they make it weird and difficult intentionally. They intentionally want to make it hard to figure out how it's graded. I guess for many reasons, but that's one of the ways that they do that. There's a exam that you'll be taking multiple choice questions, but there are also performance-based questions as well. We'll talk about more about those performance-based questions as we go through this today. So let's jump into the questions themselves. I have Gosh, plenty of questions to go through. So if you are on the Socrative screen, you will see the question change before your very eyes. And the question is, which of these security features presents an authentication prompt before allowing access? So why is that? Why does it present an authentication prompt? Well, it could be a number of different things. It might be a captive portal. It might be a VPN. It could be a multi-factor authentication. It might be a PEEP, whatever that is, or it might be an SSID broadcast. One of these features will present you with an authentication prompt before allowing access. Now, just like all of the topics on the Security Plus and all of the questions that you will get on the Security Plus exam, you are expected to answer with the best possible answer. In fact, most of the questions might even say which one of these would be the best answer for this particular question. But even if it doesn't, that's what they're looking for. So make sure you go through all of these, because I could see in a couple of these, maybe even 3 of these, I could possibly get an authentication prompt before allowing access, but that's not really what the question is about, is it? We want to find the thing that is most applicable to what's really asking about. There should be one that jumps right out at you, and you should be able to figure those pieces out. If you're wondering how to answer this, it's the way we've been answering it before. You go to Socrative.com. You click on the student login button, not the teacher login button, that's mine, and then you go to room name Professor Messer listed right there at the bottom, and then you can participate in those pieces to be able. Now, if you're in the right room, you'll see the question. If you're in the wrong room, just like walking into the wrong classroom at any school, you'll find there's nobody else in there. There's no questions on here. You want to be able to absolutely find the right answer for these. Now, my goal when I ask these questions is to get about 50% of you answering these correctly. So let's see how we did with this one and being able to work through it. So which of these security features presents an authentication prompt before allowing access? Well, how do we do? Of the 62 that have answered so far, 31% have said VPN, 30% have said captive portal, 26% said multi-factor authentication, 10% said PEEP, 3% said SSID broadcast. Now, I intentionally created this question to be somewhat vague. It doesn't really jump out at you exactly which one of these answers is the right one. And I intentionally did this because this is exactly the way the exam is. It really doesn't give you a lot of information. It doesn't lead you by the hand to find the right answer. Only one of these things presents an authentication prompt always, in every single case, before allowing access. So you should absolutely have a look through all of these things to determine which one it might be. So which one would this answer be, presenting the right piece here and understanding which it is? Well, in this particular case, we're leaning towards the captive portal. A captive portal specifically designed to pop open a presentation of a screen, a prompt, just like the one you see here, that gives you a message on the screen. You often see this if you're going into a wireless network. It might be one that doesn't even require a username and password, but it's one where it might be a guest network and it requires you click a button to continue, that you agree to the terms and conditions before doing this. It's very common to see on wireless, but you could also see this on wired networks as well. It's certainly much more common to see on a wireless environment. This is usually prompting you for a username and password. You provide some authentication information. So you're not even able to go anywhere. I'm trying to go to Google, but it won't take you to Google. Instead, it prompts you with this page, and that's called a captive portal page. Often it's a click to continue, or you might require a username and password. There might even be additional authentication factors that you have to put in. So it just depends on what type of network you're on and how stringent they are with the authentication process to add those pieces in. Once you provide your username and password, it then authenticates and says, yes, you are therefore allowed to go to certain websites, and then it continues on its way. So if you're trying to go to Google, now you're able to continue to Google. And usually it caches this information so that you're able to now surf around without constantly getting a prompt for a username and password. So let's see how we did with this particular question. I asked which of these security features presents an authentication prompt before allowing access. And the correct answer in this case is captive portal. I see 38% of you have jumped in there with the right answer. What a coincidence. Now, it's not necessarily VPN, although a number of VPN technologies do prompt a message. It's not really to provide access. It's to start the VPN tunnel. you don't actually have access to anything yet other than initiating the VPN communication. And in some cases, especially with something like IPsec and communication between two different devices, there's no interactive prompt whatsoever. So you can't always rely on a VPN to always prompt for an authentication or some type of prompt before allowing access. You also, a lot of you chose multi-factor authentication, which is that's the information you would put in once you are prompted for some type of authentication. It's not something that prompts you for authentication. So I understand it's a little bit of semantics in there, yes, but you do need to understand the difference between something that is providing a prompt and something that's expecting the data that's going inside of that prompt. So that's why I made this particularly specific with this type of information. PEEP is a technology used for authentication, specifically for doing an encrypted and protected form of authentication commonly seen on wireless networks. And an SSID broadcast, of course, is what a wireless network uses to broadcast the name of that device out to the world. That's the name you see in the list of wireless networks. That's obviously not providing an authentication prompt whatsoever. It's more of an informational prompt. So if you're one of the folks that answered A, captive portal, 39% of you got that one. Absolutely right. Well done with that one. Well, let's do another question. That was a good warm up, wasn't it? Let's do something that's more direct, something that really is asking you a very specific question, which is, which of these are commonly used to control traffic through a firewall? Kind of hard to see with my big head in the way there, isn't it? Which of these are commonly used to control traffic through a firewall? Pick two of these as the possible answer. Well, which two would those be? Well, I have a list of those for you right here, as a matter of fact. These two might be, if I scroll down, you'll be able to see all of them. Would it be MAC address, TCP port, SSID, encryption type, operating system version, and application? So two of these are commonly used to control traffic through a firewall. This is obviously an important consideration for someone going into security, because in IT security, you will be managing a firewall. You will be managing the process of setting up rules to control traffic to go from one part of the network to another. And in those cases, you will be setting up these tuplets, these very specific sets of parameters that you can set to allow or disallow certain access through that firewall. So make sure that you have a look at these so that you can understand what the firewall might prompt you for. Now, this is not an easily Googleable one. Is that a word, Googleable? It's not easily Googleable. This is when you really have to have at least some hands-on with a firewall to be able to configure some of these, or perhaps you've watched my video on firewalls where I talk about configuring a firewall and doing these types of things. This is an important part of IT security, is managing these firewalls and getting these rules correct. So make sure you go through these. If you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com to the room named Professor Messer. Why would I say easily Googled when the word Googleable is much more fun to say? I think even if it isn't a word, it should be. Let's see how we did with this one. We'll click, and you can see we're looking probably for 50-50, right? Because we're picking two. You'll notice up here it says pick two. That's an important part of these. So if we pick the two highest ones, we'll go with that on this list. 46% said TCP port, 29% said MAC address. The next highest number at 18% is application, and then single digits for SSID, encryption type, and operating system version. So which one of these would it be for the firewall? Well, one of the most common ways, or at least one of the, from a legacy perspective, traditionally, firewalls have always filtered information on TCP or UDP port number. That layer 4 port number is an important thing that we use to be able to filter information. And it's usually filtered in a traditional sense along with the IP address. So you have an IP address and a port number, and you're allowing or you're disallowing where the traffic is flowing based on that information. If you're coming from this network and you're going to this network using these particular port numbers, we're either going to allow or we're going to deny that traffic. It's a relatively simple process on a firewall. It goes down the list and it tries to see if it matches on that list, and then it decides whether it will allow or disallow based on that match. So we know that port numbers will be used. So obviously those of you that did answer that B, TCP port, there's 47% of you did get that one absolutely right. So really the next question is, what about MAC address? What about application? I guess we'll throw out the single digits down here, but MAC address and application might certainly apply to this as well. One of the things that firewalls can often do is encrypt traffic as well. We were just talking about VPNs, especially IPsec VPNs, connecting different sites together over the internet. It's a very common way to be able to connect remote locations to each other by using your existing internet connection. And it's very common to see on firewalls as well. Some of the older firewalls might even proxy traffic. Some of the newer firewalls proxy traffic, but they generally do that to be able to decrypt SSL traffic, which is an interesting science unto itself. And another nice thing about these firewalls is they can also be routers. Now, what I don't have in this particular slide, but I do mention it in my firewall video, is firewalls can not only manage where traffic is going based on IP address and port number, but now the newer firewalls, what they're traditionally in the industry calling next generation firewalls, is a layer 7 device. It's able to understand the application that's in use, and you can now set firewall rules based on what application someone is using. So, of course, if you look at applications like Facebook, Twitter, you can have Google, you've got applications like Oracle, you've got Microsoft Outlook, you've got hundreds, even thousands of different applications that are out there. The firewall is smart enough to understand what application you're using, even if it's using the same IP address and port numbers everything else you're using. So it's pretty interesting to be able to have that level of detail. In fact, most of the newer firewalls can see you using Twitter, and they can differentiate between you reading a Twitter feed and posting to Twitter, so that a network administrator can allow you to read Twitter, but the firewall will prevent you from posting anything, which is quite remarkable. We're really getting into the detail of managing and controlling these firewalls. So based on that information, we can have a look at these, and you can see that TCP port was certainly the correct answer. The other type of information we were looking for in this list is application. If you answered B and F, you got this one absolutely right. Well, why is it not MAC address? Wouldn't a firewall at a basic level, shouldn't it be able to filter on MAC address? And the answer is you certainly could, but it would be relatively pointless. That's because on most firewalls, you are communicating out to many different subnets. It's not just anything that's local on your subnet. It's things that might be to Google. It might be to Facebook. It might be to Twitter. Well, we aren't able to know what the MAC addresses are of those devices because they're on a different subnet. Those MAC addresses that we know are only on our local subnet. And having a firewall that only protects devices on your local subnet is almost pointless, of course. So we don't generally see firewalls configured to allow or disallow traffic based on a MAC address because it's relatively useless. We could do a whole conversation about the process of routing traffic from one site to another and how that works, but that's exactly why MAC addresses aren't commonly seen on a firewall. Let's see if we can see how we did here. So the 28% of you that said MAC address, not quite the right answer, but I have a feeling you got at least half of them. So if you answered TCP port and if you answered application, got them absolutely right. Well done with that one. Well, we're moving right along now. So let's do another question, shall we? Let's move along to this one. Since we're talking about what's across the network, I'm going to give you what I consider to be a performance-based question. So this is one where on your exam, you can certainly be asked multiple choice questions, but you might also be asked questions to fill in the blank. You might be asked questions to match different items. So you might have a picture and a description, and you have to match the different items to each other. You may be asked to put things in order from ascending to descending, back and forth, that kind of thing. That is where you really do get into the details of knowing these different pieces. So make sure that you're able to understand what might be prompted of you. CompTIA has a great video on their YouTube page that they describe the different performance-based questions you might be given. So I thought I would give you one. I'm not going to give you any prompting. There's no multiple choice on this particular question. It's what port and protocol is commonly used for DNS queries. This is one where we really do have to know what these differences are. We have to understand and memorize all of these different port numbers because you're using them all the time in security. With IT security and IT networking, port numbers are just a normal way of life. They eventually get cemented into your brain. And it's one of those things that you run into that's just a normal part of your job. So although it seems like you're being asked to remember a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense because there's no context, when you start working with them over and over and over in the world, you will find that this is a pretty normal thing to be able to work through and have them here. I think whenever I start looking at all of these different options that are available, it does become a bit more of a challenge to have here. Most of you are doing pretty well with this one, by the way, for these DNS queries. I'm not going to show the exact answers coming through because there's no way to summarize a fill-in-the-blank answer. I think most of you are doing pretty well. Stop Googling the answer, though. I see some of you are just copying and pasting. Stop that. Don't have that answer in there. Pretend that you're really looking at this and addressing it straight ahead. So about that last question, we were talking about MAC addresses really don't apply for a firewall. MAC address filtering is a thing, but generally on wireless networks. MAC address filtering is not a thing at all on firewalls. You rarely see that functionality on any firewall, really. There's probably a few out there that you may be able to find that are open source, but anybody that's using a firewall in an enterprise is not filtering based on MAC address. So that is where you really do go through these things and you're able to work through those pieces. There's a lot of going through these. Yes, I can not that I found out that you're Googling, I can see you. Bet you didn't know that. See that camera that's right there on the top of your screen? See, shouldn't have that there. I say that. I got a flyer from Comcast, from Xfinity, who is my cable company, my cable television provider, and they sent me a flyer that says I need to send them or go online, and they will send me their newest remote control that has a microphone in it, and I can simply talk to the remote control, and it will do whatever I tell the television to do. Sounds like a horrible idea. And I'm a little suspicious that they're sending me something that is really asking me to put a microphone in my house for them. Is that too weird? Am I becoming that person? Trying not to be. These days, I'm not sure that's really too far off the mark. UDP is what we are looking for here. A specific UDP port for DNS is UDP port 53. That is the one that is commonly used for queries. Now, DNS is a really crazy thing. I'm specifically in this particular question asked you about DNS queries. There are other conversations that take place across the network for DNS that are DNS conversations to transfer information from one device to another. Zone transfers is commonly done over TCP. But I was specifically asking you for a UDP port number. You should be answering both. When somebody asks you a port number, you should be answering the type of port number and then the number itself. So when I ask you what the port number is for a DNS query, you should be answering UDP 53. Now on your Security Plus exam, this is the only UDP port you have to know. This is one of those where if you look at this particular question, this particular slide, this is a slide of all of the UDP ports that are asked of you on the Security Plus exam objectives. There's just one, UDP 53. So if you on this particular question answered UDP 53, and most of you did, some of you answered port 53, you get half credit for that one. Always specify UDP or TCP because TCP port 53, although it sounds similar, a completely different thing. If your DNS query was trying to use TCP port 53 to a server that's not providing zone transfers or providing queries on that particular port number, then you won't get an answer from that device. So although the number is the same, 53, the difference between TCP and UDP are light years difference. It's the difference between going from a different, like say you have an Oak Street and an Oak Lane and an Oak Circle. Those are three different streets. Okay, but they have oak in them, right? It's the same tree. Well, completely different place. You're going to a completely different place. So make sure you specify that anytime. Yeah, interestingly enough, on the CompTIA Security Plus exam objectives, on the list of port numbers that you need to know, this is the only UDP port that's asked of you. Isn't that interesting? So that's one of those that's, I guess there is some NetBIOS UDP in there, although some of the UDP for NetBIOS is not used. Most of it's TCP for NetBIOS 137, 138. So that's very interesting that that they do it that way. That those are the things that that CompTIA is asking for. But make sure you download the exam objectives so you know those. Those are the things that are most important. There are a ton of port numbers you have to know on the exam. There's a huge list. They're all on the exam objectives. They're in my videos. You can, of course, write them all down, have your notes available to you. In fact, I have over 200 videos that I've created for the Security Plus exam, and you can, of course, take notes on all of them, and I recommend that you do. Now, if you're uninterested in going through all 200 of these videos and writing down everything that's on every slide, or making a copy of every single graphic that is there on these, then, of course, you can do that. But I've already done it for you as well. My Security Plus course notes are something that has a list of everything from every single one of these videos. In fact, I have the course notes up on my screen right here. I've taken all of the graphics, all of the details, all of the text, all the IP addressing information. There's the port numbers and everything that's on there, and working through those. There are some that have multiple port numbers listed, and I've listed out in the cases where there is TCP and UDP, the combinations of those. Here's my OSI model list for those. This is one where everything is in this PDF, it seems. I've tried to take every bit of text that was important and being able to put these into this list and have them available to you. This doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace you watching the videos, but it's a way to have some nice lists of notes available, something you can use for yourself if you're planning to study up for the exam just before you walk in to take that exam information. So you might want to have a look at these. This is something available on my website at professormesser.com/securitycn. It's only $10, and it's something that, of course, every dollar goes back to supporting the website and keeping things running. This is one of the ways that we're able to make this entire process work. So this is one where it does become handy to have these notes available. Go ahead and check it out yourself. I've got more detail on my website at professormesser.com/securitycn. And I want to thank everybody who has supported and purchased the Security Plus course notes. It goes a long way to keeping things going. And I want to thank you, of course, for your support of the website. Let's do another question. Let's move along to these pieces. Since we're talking about security, one of the things I always say about the Security Plus exam is it's not entirely a technical certification. A lot of this exam really is more about process and procedure. And this is a very good question that does talk about process and procedure. This question is, which of these are commonly part of a tabletop exercise? So now, of course, we have to know what these certainly what these things are, the tabletop exercise. See if you happen to know what this might be. Now, which of these are commonly part? Well, would it be application testing is performed to the designated disaster recovery site? Would it be the response to a simulated disaster is discussed? Might it be that a set of disaster recovery plans are created? Could it be that a server and network redundancy systems are tested? Or could it be that a random set of data is recovered from a backup system? Yes, now you're going to have to figure out which of these, and only one of these, would commonly be part of a tabletop exercise. This, again, is that special keyword they use on the exams, which is the best answer, or which of these are commonly part. You're looking for the thing that is most common to occur during a tabletop exercise. If you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com. You can answer yourself. See if you happen to know what it is. And then, of course, you find that client login, the student login, they call it, and then go to the Professor Messer room and you yourself. I know it's a hard one to Google, isn't it? You're gonna have a hard time doing that one. Pretend you're taking the exam. Just take a stab at it. Don't have to get it right. See if you can figure it out and being able to work through these pieces and have that there. This is one that becomes really useful for the tabletop exercise. Tabletop exercise. This is one that actually is an interesting exercise to participate in if you ever have a chance to do this. It's more interesting than you think it might be, actually, to go through these pieces. Let's see. A lot of you are answering this one. I'm going to take a sneak peek and see how you're doing. Most of you are doing really well with this one. I think most of you are figuring out what a tabletop exercise might be. Let's talk about tabletop exercises. Well, sort of like playing a board game, like playing Go. It's almost exactly like playing a board game, as a matter of fact. It is the ultimate in a role-playing game. is really what it is. You have everything but your D20 and being able to work through it. This is because if you've ever been through a disaster recovery drill, it's a thing. It is a big monster of a thing. There's a lot of coordination. You have to get a lot of people involved. There's usually downtime involved in your organization. It has to be done on the weekends, or it has to be done late at night, or it has to be done over a weekend. It's really quite a bit of a challenge to get all of the right people in the right place and really have a good test. So one of the things you may want to consider is simply sitting around a table and going through the steps that you would follow if a drill occurred. And it makes people start thinking at especially a management level how this would happen. For example, you walk into a room, everybody sits down, welcome to the exercise. You pull out, I feel like there's a very interesting way to look at how this would work. So there might be a number of different problems that are suddenly tasked. Somebody pulls out an envelope and says, here's the problem that just occurred. So this is that Parks and Recreation episode for those of you that now suddenly the disaster occurs. Everyone's in the room. What do you do? And it might be you had a water break. It might be there was a natural disaster. It could be that there was a fire in a particular building, and here's what it affected. And now everyone has to decide, what do you do next? What are the steps to go? How do you get everything back up and running after this? And you can go all the way down the line of figuring out exactly to a very detailed level, what are you going to do? Where are you going to get this information? Where are you going to get new machines? Where are you going to get people? Do you need to now transport people from one place to the other? How do you do that? And if it's a natural disaster, this may not be easy to get the resources that you need. You may not be able to book a transport company if a natural disaster just came through. So you really have to think about how you are going to go through this task. I'm based out of Florida. Most of the disaster recovery drills that we do are based around hurricanes. But I've been in environments where there have been water breaks on the floor just above where all of our computing center was. The entire data center was just below where the water break was. Enormous challenges associated with this. Yeah, this is kind of military, isn't it, in the way that it works through this. Being able to work through these pieces. You're really talking through the simulation of a disaster. So this is where when somebody asks you about a tabletop exercise and what you would expect to be doing during this tabletop exercise, those 58% of you answered a response to a disaster is discussed. And that's exactly what happens. Now, obviously, it's a little more involved than just discussing. There's probably a bit more in being able to work through these pieces. But some of these things don't really apply to a tabletop exercise. For instance, a set of disaster recovery plans are created. If you're creating your plans during the disaster, you're not doing this right. So the tabletop exercise is not for you to create the plans. It might be for you to tweak the plans a bit, to fix the plans a little bit better. But no, this is not the time when you make the plans. It's too late. Once the disaster has happened, it's too late to make any plans based on any of these things. Application testing is performed to the designated disaster recovery site. Well, not really, because you're not actually doing anything. This is a tabletop exercise where you're talking about performing the application to this disaster recovery site and deploying it to that site, probably not actually doing it. Next up on the list, you have a server and network redundancy systems are tested, not actually testing anything. And a random set of data is recovered from a backup system. Again, you're not actually going through the actual process. You'll be talking about the actual process. Now, this doesn't mean that's all you should be doing. If you're working on disaster recovery, you should be testing your disaster recovery site. You should be recovering from a backup. You should be testing your redundancy systems. Those should be part of your normal tests. But our specific question here was asking part of a tabletop exercise. And that's one where we really wanted to know specifics about that very detailed security-related role and keeping things up and running. So if you answered B, the response to a simulated disaster discussed, the 58% of you got that one. Absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another question, shall we? Let's continue on. This is one where I'm now, again, asking you for 2 responses. This is a very common thing you'll see on the exam is it'll pop up a question and it will ask you for multiple responses. And you'll find that on the exam screen, the button that's next to the question. If you're answering one, it's what they call a radio button. It's a little circle with a dot in the middle. If they're asking for multiple answers, it usually changes into a box with the check in the middle or with the X in the middle. And that's one of your visual prompts to let you know that, oh, they want more than one answer here. And this is one where I do want more than one answer. The question is, which of these boy, I did a miserable job with this. Which of these are common operating system? Which of these are? Strike the word would there. Common operating. Did I mention that there was a time change earlier in the week? Which of these are common operating system hardening techniques? Pick two of these, and perhaps you'll be able to even read these later. Regardless, let's see how badly I mangled the rest of the text. Would it be to always keep router and switch firmware updated? Would it be to require periodic password changes? Would it be to disable unnecessary system services? Would it be to audit the firewall for unnecessary access rules? Or would it be to use a VPN to connect to the corporate network when traveling? Which of these are common operating system hardening techniques? I'm just going to own it at this point. Pick two of these, and you'll be able to go through and figure these out too. What was I thinking? Which of these we're going to gone. So at least I fixed one of them, right? Which of these are common operating system hardening techniques? There we go. Real time, people. That's one of those things whenever you start working through the list of all of the things you need to do. Being able to fix these on the fly is one of them. It's live, people. What can I tell you? Which of these are? Now, operating system hardening is an important aspect of the Security Plus exam. It's one of those things that's in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure that if you don't have these exam objectives, that you go to CompTIA's website and get them. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives, because operating system hardening techniques is specifically written in to the exam objectives. It's an important one to be able to do this and being able to work through these pieces. Let's see how we did. I think I've talked enough about them. All of you are trying to Google all of these things. I can tell by the count. You can see on this list, I can see how many people are logged in, and I can see how many people have answered. Even if I'm not looking at the answers yet, I can see how many people have put in their answer. And when it goes really slow, I know that suddenly that all of the Google servers got a little spike. That suddenly people are trying to figure this one out and go through these pieces. Let's see how you did. Let's click the button. Well, we're sort of mixed, aren't we? We have 44% said disable unnecessary system services. 31%, well, of course, we're looking for 2, so hopefully this will be mixed, would be require periodic password changes. Although here's double digits. We got always keep router and firmware, switch firmware updated. Also double digits would be to audit the firewall for unnecessary access rules. And hardly anybody chose use a VPN to connect to the corporate network when traveling. So is this one of those cases where we think we might have the answer and the answer might not be right? Is that one of those to be able to work through this? Let's see how we did. Some of you didn't even recognize I had multiple words in here that were completely pointless, and being able to work through. Well, I thank you for that, my people. Those are the ones that are trying to figure this out. Let's talk about operating system hardening. This is when you're trying to make sure that the security of your operating systems is increased or is as good as it possibly could be. It's not, of course, any one single thing. You can't click a button and, hey, my operating system is now hardened and protected from the world. It's really multiple things, and being able to go through constant maintenance on these servers to constantly keep them updated, have all the patches updated, and make sure all of those pieces are there. This is a bit of a challenge too, because if you miss one thing or you misconfigure the one thing, now your operating system is not quite as hardened. It's not quite as secure anymore. So some of the things you may want to consider doing to keep your operating system secure is to disable any unnecessary services. These are the services that are on a computer. Windows has a lot of services running by default. You may not need all of them. Every single service is an opportunity for somebody to find a vulnerability and get into your system. So it'd be nice if you could get rid of any services that may be unnecessary. Another one, from an operating system perspective is your operating system may have a management interface. There may be a login that you log in to gain access to the management of that device. Very common on a server, of course, so that we can manage this when we're somewhere else. But we may want to harden that interface, either disable it completely or limit exactly who may be able to connect to that particular interface. And certainly you want to change things like the default passwords and usernames that are used to get into those devices. And of course, password protection itself is important on these operating systems. Yes, this is a pretty important thing in being able to work through them, is knowing exactly what is here and what's able to work through. I think that's one wherever I start working through these and working through where I'm going to find all of these challenges is my passwords constantly changing. It's a constant change for all of these passwords. And that's why whenever we start talking about securing an operating system, this becomes always an important consideration of those and working through them. This is one whenever I'm looking at these then, which one of these are associated with an operating system and making the operating system more secure? Well, 43% of you said to disable any unnecessary system services. That absolutely would make my operating system more secure. Some of you said to require periodic password changes. That would absolutely make my operating system more secure. Keeping router and switch firmware updated has nothing to do with an operating system. I guess it has something to do with the operating system of a switch and router, but when we say operating system in the world of IT, we're really talking about what's running on our servers, not on our switches, not on our routers. So that's not necessarily an operating system hardening technique. It's more of a firmware or an appliance hardening technique, if you want to think of it that way. Auditing the firewall for unnecessary access rules. Well, auditing a firewall is certainly important. Your rules should certainly be kept up to date. But of course, that really doesn't help your operating system. We're really allowing or disallowing access through a network, not allowing or disallowing access to an operating system. So that really would not apply as a common operating system hardening technique. And using a VPN to connect to the corporate network when traveling certainly protects the communication going across the network. And you should, of course, use a VPN when you're traveling or outside of your organization to make sure all of that information is protected and encrypted. But that does nothing to keep your operating system more secure. So that's not a really common operating system hardening technique. If you answered C, disable unnecessary system services, and B, require periodic password changes, which most of you did, then you got this answer absolutely correct. Well done on that one. Well, we're moving right along now. So let's do another security-related question. Since we're sort of in this world of trying to figure out technique and style, I think this would be a good one to use. Which of these would fuzzing help to identify? Now, it seems that, again, I didn't type things properly, but no, fuzzing is the actual word I was going after here. Which of these would fuzzing help to identify? So you, of course, need to know what fuzzing is. It's a thing. No, it's a real thing. You should. It's a real thing. Go through the fuzzing of this. Would fuzzing help to identify man-in-the-middle attacks, SQL injection vulnerabilities, input validation shortcomings, routing errors, or virus infections? One of these, which one of these would fuzzing help to identify? Maybe you know what this would be, and if you think you know the answer, don't Google. Go to Socrative.com to the student login. I keep saying that. I'm very sorry. To the room name Professor Messer, and you'll be able to answer the question on what fuzzing would help to identify. This, again, is one of those topics that comes directly from the CompTIA Security Plus exam objectives. Oh, good. So some of you recognize this particular name of this. You understand I wasn't typing just random things into this list, or in this particular case, I was not typing random things into my list of questions. This is an actual thing done with actual security. In fact, this is a pretty important security thing. You absolutely need to know what the fuzzing is and being able to work through it. In fact, in my video, I show you, I actually do some fuzzing in my video right there. And it's live and it's on YouTube, and it still complies with all of YouTube's terms of and conditions. Which of these would fuzzing help to identify? Well, you're kind of slow on this one, so we're going to click and see how you did so far. 56% of you said input validation shortcomings, but 21% of you said squirrel injection vulnerabilities. That's how we say it here in the South, is squirrel. It's not SQL. 16% of you said man-in-the-middle attacks, and hardly anybody said routing errors or virus infections. So it's got to be one of these top three, right? Man-in-the-middle attacks, SQL injections, input validation shortcomings, one of those. Fuzzing is an interesting thing. It's not something you would commonly do. It's really a very specific task that is applied to an application. With fuzzing, what we do is end up sending what is effectively random sets of input to an application. Now, obviously, when you're working through these applications, they are applications that are expecting some type of input. So it could be any application that's expecting you to type in a name, an address, a zip code, or any other bit of input. This is how most of our applications work, of course. They take input from us and they output something else. The input may be something interactive that we're doing. The input may be coming from a file. This is also called fault injecting or robustness testing or syntax testing or negative testing. The term fuzzing has a lot of different terms associated with it. These are all effectively doing the same thing. We're looking to break the app. We're looking for the app to do something that is not normal. If it's looking for a zip code and we give it a bunch of text, does it do anything with that text? Are we able to solve a problem? Are we able to make the application crash? Are we able to get into the memory inside of the system, take advantage of a vulnerability? There is a great fuzzing generator you can go through, University of Wisconsin, Operating System Utility Program Reliability, where you can bring up a fuzz generator and work through and fuzz an application yourself. It's a great thing to work through. I've been going through a number of these. As I mentioned in my video, I popped open a fuzzer. I started going through the application, and the options, they give you a fully running live CD effectively where you can run these, and it works great to go through them. And I was able to make the application perform differently than it was intended, which was exactly the way it was set up to be able to work through those. But what a great way to go through and try it out yourself. And you can, of course, watch my video where I do it as well. It's a great thing to do and go through these pieces. So if you answered on your list, let's go back to our list of things. So if you answered input validation shortcomings is what we're helping to identify. If you were the 57% that answered C, you'd be absolutely correct. Fuzzing is not normally something that's looking specifically for SQL injection vulnerabilities. There are a number of tools and utilities you can use to help with SQL injection vulnerabilities, but this is not necessarily what fuzzing is about. Fuzzing is about making just randomness happen with a particular application. So again, we're looking to find this very specific answer that fits all of these particular responses that are on these questions. Make sure you think about those whenever you're working through all of those pieces. Well, obviously, there's a lot to learn with Security Plus. There's the fuzzing and the VPNs and all the port numbers and setting up a firewall. And how do you get any practical experience in doing any of these things if you've never worked in IT security before? Well, it would be nice if there were some labs already set up where you had an exact view of the world that was already with firewalls. You already had VPN connections you could configure. If you had a lab that had all these port numbers that you could set up, if there was all of these available and something you could simply open up your browser and click on without loading any additional software, then you would have something like the GTS Learning Live Labs with Security Plus. This is something that, in fact, I have it up on my screen. I was stepping through all of the live labs on here. I've got them. I was going through. They have host security, protocol analyzers, network vulnerabilities. This one has man in the middle with ARP spoofing. That'd be interesting. Let's click on that. And it takes you to the lab. It has a description of what the lab is. You can see it over on my right side under my head there. And it steps through all the different screens that you'll have. And it goes through even screenshots. I can even pop this up as a separate view so that it's kind of cramped on my screen as you see it. And over on this side are the devices. So there's a domain controller, Windows 7 device, and I'm clicking on them and clicking the power button as if they were real machines sitting right in front of me. This obviously is taking advantage of virtualization to be able to do this. So I can simply start up that machine. So it's running a full-blown version of Windows or Linux or Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows Server. This happens to be a Linux server. Here's a Windows 7 device, a domain controller. So there's a Windows server as well. And it has all of the exercises that you need to step through to learn these particular security-related tasks. Now, what's nice about this, as I mentioned, there's no additional software to load. It's using HTML5. If you're someone who has an older browser, and it's kind of hard to even find a browser not using HTML5 at this point, but it also has a Java version of this remote desktop front end. I don't like running Java in my browser, so I have Java turned off on my browser. In fact, the Chrome that I'm using doesn't even allow the browser to run Java inside of it anymore. I have to do it separately. Once the server starts up, you simply click on it, and it uses that HTML5 function to give you remote desktop into this device. So where else are you going to have instantly a Windows Server 2008 R2 running? And now you can start up your system and start running through all of the different things expected for this. Maybe you're building a VPN. Maybe you're setting up a firewall. Maybe you're configuring, for this particular link, doing an IMAP scan and performing a man-in-the-middle attack and doing ARP poisoning. So I'll click on a Windows 7. Here's my Windows 7 device. It's full-blown Windows, by the way. You don't have to follow what's in the tasks set aside, because this is a real version of Windows. You're not limited in any way. It's not a simulation of Windows. I could load other applications. I can go through the file system. I can go through everything that's on this computer. And the nice part about it is I can't break anything. If this is something I mess up, I can power it down, reset it, and start it back up again. You really can't go wrong. You can also try this out for an hour for free by going to professormesser.com/seclabs, SEC Labs, and then at the bottom, just scroll down to the bottom, and you can get an hour of this for free. So if you're not sure, is this for me? Is this something I can use? Maybe you aren't sure. Well, try it out. You'll be able to tell once you start playing around with it for just a little bit. You'll be able to see very quickly if this makes sense for what you're trying to do. This comes in handy, I think, whenever I start stepping through all of the different things I need to know. It's all in one place. And I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning. They're big sponsors of what we do here, and also helps a lot with us trying to learn more about getting through these performance-based questions and working through those pieces as well. Well, let's do some more questions, shall we? I've got plenty more here. Some of them even have the proper grammar and spelling. So we should probably do one of those. Here's one that it looks like I'm not spelling things properly, but I really am. The question is, which of these would be a common use of SAML? Which of these would be a common use of SAML? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have a list of things. Fortunately, I'm not asking you to do a fill in the blank on this one. Would it be to authenticate to a service using credentials from a third party? Would it be to restrict access to a network-based? Well, see, another one, restrict access to a network. Oh, that's pretty good. Based on TCP port number. Again, a little bit groggy in the head. Would it be to encrypt traffic over an 802.11 wireless network? Would it be to digitally sign a document sent over email? Or would it be to secure tape backup stored in an off-site facility? So one of these would be SAML. SAML is something that absolutely is in your CompTIA Security Plus exam objectives. You want to be sure you understand what SAML is and how SAML works. But what is SAML? I'm really asking for a very broad understanding at this first part. I'm trying to get you a feel for what you might be asked and the type of things you'll run across. And this is certainly one of those things you'll be asked. Stop Googling this one. Now I'm watching you do it as I'm watching the answers come in. There are a ton of acronyms on this exam, as they're saying in the chat room. One of the things about the acronyms that you'll run into, especially with this exam, is there's a lot for security. There's probably more for Network Plus, but Security Plus also has a ton of acronyms and a ton of different terms. I think Security Plus is more focused on terms than it is necessarily acronyms, but there's plenty of acronyms in here as well. So when you get into security and you get into these concepts of virtual private networks and captive portals and be able to work through the different tuples of a security policy on a firewall, this is where you really do get into the details of understanding these pieces. I think it really does come in handy just knowing all of these terms and how you work with them. If you're in IT security, you get used to saying these things over and over and working with them over and over. They become second nature. But if somebody's never heard of SAML, or they've never heard of captive portal, or they've never heard of an IPsec VPN, that's a completely different world that you would have to get into to know these things. Let's see how we did with understanding SAML. There's a lot of memorization. The Security Plus exam, very broad and a lot of different topics. It is probably the largest set of course notes I have is for Security Plus. So it makes sense. Well, 62% of you, if we went with the majority, said authenticate to a service using the credentials from a third party, but 22% has digitally signed a document sent over email. And then we've got single digits for the other people that are still in the running here for restricting access based on a TCP port number, encrypting access over traffic over an 802.11 network, and securing tape stored in an offsite facility. So one of these has got to be the right thing, right? If we go with the majority, it would be authenticating to a service using these credentials, or it would be digitally signing a document sent over email. Well, SAML is such a long set of terms that you can't even see it because my head's in the way for these pieces. SAML is a Security Association markup language. This is when you need to get access to a resource that's on a server. And it's usually on some third party that's out there in the world. But you aren't using a set of credentials at your facility, and you're not using a set of credentials at the resource facility. In fact, you're using credentials that are being stored and managed from a third party. You often see this a lot with you're logging into a site. In fact, if you go to the chat that's on my website, the chat that's on my website asks you to log in using authentication for this particular chat, or you could log in with your Google login, or you can log in with your Facebook login. That's a very common way to provide authentication, but neither of us is keeping any of that authentication or managing the process. This is a very common standard. This is a way that everybody can now do authentication without necessarily having to maintain the overhead of this authentication process. This is one that has a couple of three different things that work together. There's a service provider, there is a client, it's usually just in your web browser itself, and then there's the identity provider that's actually providing the username and password. And I have on my website the entire flow of SAML, which takes all of these. You can't even see the authentication server that's in this view. Let's click that. So you've got your client tries to get a resource on a particular resource server, and the resource server says, well, sure, but I'm going to need the SAML information, and it redirects you, the user, to go talk to the authentication server to get that. So then you go, okay, well, let me log in with my Facebook login, whatever it happens to be. That authentication is giving you a token back to your machine. At that point, you provide the token to the resource server, and the resource server says, okay, you're legit. I've checked this token. It's a legitimate token coming from the authentication server. It was clearly signed by the authentication server. It's one of the great advantages we have of using this asymmetric type of encryption and digital signatures is that you're providing a token that really was signed by the authentication server. It could have only been signed by the authentication server, and therefore the resource server doesn't even have to talk to the authentication server to even know if you're legit. That's crazy, and yet it works perfectly. So SAML is a nice thing to be able to use, to be able to work through. I like that the functionality is there, and you see it all the time. You don't even know this is going on behind the scenes. It's just a normal part of what we do with our technologies. So if you are one of the folks that answered A, authenticate to a service using credentials from a third party, you got this one absolutely correct. We're running out of time, so let's do another one real quick, shall we? Let's go through another question. Since we're talking about keys, this is something that has the word key in it, and being able to work through which of these is the best description of key escrow. And I have some options there to be able to work through these. The options are all email is encrypted with a private key. All public keys are stored in a central repository. Hashes from all documents are stored on a separate device. A decryption mechanism is held by a third party, or all documents are digitally signed by default. So one of these is going to be the best description of key escrow. What is it? What is it? What is it? If you think you know, go to Socrative.com to the student login, go to the room Professor Messer, and you can answer. Of course, if you're watching this on the replay, you cannot. That's one of the challenges, of course. Now, if you are someone who is watching this for continuing education units, you're someone who has already got your Security Plus certification and you would like to collect CEUs. You can also use this for Network Plus and A Plus as well, since security is a topic on those exams. If you're watching this either live or on the replay, you can get 1 hour of CEUs by going to the top or the bottom of my website. There's a Contact Us link at the top or the bottom. You click on that, you put that this is the March 2016 Security Plus study group, and you put the special keyword inside of that of SAML. And then I will know that you must have watched this entire thing. If you got all the way to the end, you knew what the keyword was, and you sent this to me, I will send you back a digital message that says, yes, you indeed watched this, which I will sign digitally with my digital signature. That way, everybody knows that it came from me, just like SAML works. See how nice that is? And that is the way that I will send you back. Usually it takes me about a week or so, and I get back with everybody on all of the latest CEU updates, and then you'll have 1 hour of CEU time. So which of these would be the best description of key escrow? Let's see how we did with this one. Let's click a button. Well, we've got a combination of different things here. I think we're kind of split, although 52%, we'll go with the majority. A decryption mechanism is held by a third party, but 36%, a pretty good showing even for Ohio, is that all public keys are stored in a central repository. And then we got single digits for everything else. All emails encrypted with a private key. Hashes from all documents are stored on a separate device, and all documents are digitally signed by default. So based on these, we might go with the majority of a decryption mechanism held by a third party, but all public keys stored in a central repository. It almost sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? How are these even different? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about key escrow. An escrow, obviously, is when a third party is holding something for you. That you might be holding money. If you have a mortgage, you probably have a set of dollars, a set of money that is set aside by your lending institution as an escrow, because you know that for your mortgage, you have to pay your house payment, but there's also payments that happen throughout the year for things like insurance and things like taxes. Well, some of these things are paid by this escrow, this money that you've set aside. Well, it's a similar thing for encryption. We can set aside the keys that would be needed to decrypt information. That's your biggest challenge when you're encrypting all of this data, is that eventually something might happen to the original key, and now all of this information that is encrypted, you have no way to gain access to it. But there are some very specific ways to gain access if you've taken this key or something that provides this third-party access and you have somebody else hold it. So somebody obviously that you trust is holding on to these keys. That way, if your computer gets wiped and the key gets deleted, if your backups fail and you can't restore the key, you would still have another place to go to be able to get the keys that would allow you to decrypt that information. This is obviously something that you're storing in a very safe place, in a very secure place. You have to trust this third party. Extremely important that you're not giving these keys away to somebody you cannot trust. This is something you really do have to plan ahead as well, because if you don't have a plan and you lose your key, you've now lost all of that data. So obviously this is an extremely important part of this. Well, in my question, I asked which of these is the best description of key escrow, and we were sort of torn. Obviously, a decryption mechanism being held by a third party, in this case, D is the correct answer. 55% of you said, yeah, that's what it is, and you're absolutely correct. Now, those of you that said all public keys are stored in a central repository, this is not key escrow because you're storing the public keys. Public keys by default should be stored and given to anybody. They are public. There are, in fact, a number of key servers out on the internet that are storing public keys so that you could find. If you go search through the key servers, you'll find my public key so that you can then send me an encrypted message. These public keys being stored in this repository are simply storage devices. They're not a key escrow. Key escrow is specifically used for decrypting data that is already encrypted. I can't decrypt anything from a public key. It's really a way to have all of these here and being able to work through them. Whenever I start working all of these pieces together, that's when you really run into a challenge. It's something you have to really think about whenever you're going through and planning for your encryption mechanisms and your PKI, your public key infrastructure. Key escrow is obviously going to be part of that PKI. It's an important thing to consider when you're working through all of these pieces. I know that whenever I'm setting up these, you have to, of course, keep that in mind. Very important for all of these. Whenever I start working through all of the things that I like to go through and working through all of my study groups and getting all of these pieces together, I really have to get all of the questions that come from you. I really couldn't do it without your help. So whenever we do this one next month, if you're watching this live, you're watching this on the replay, you can actually find when we're doing the next one of these at professormesser.com/calendar. Also at the top of the page is also a calendar link that you can go to as well. And go through those. You'll see whenever the next study groups are, because I do an A+, a Network Plus, and a Security Plus study group every month. Our next one will be on April the 20th. And of course, I want to thank everyone for going out and looking at my course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. Of course, if you're looking for other things that we do throughout the month, you can find us at professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/ Instagram / whatever it happens to be. You'll find me wherever those things happen to be. If you are someone who's planning to take your exam, don't forget that discounts are available on my website at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, you can always look at those 1 hour of free Security Plus labs at professormesser.com/seclabs. Well, we've come to the end of an hour of Q&A. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you're here watching live, make sure you stick around, or even watching on the replay, stick around. We got another hour. Well, I'll open up the phone lines. You're welcome to call in, and I'll go through some of the questions that you've sent me throughout the month. We'll go through all of those pieces as well. Thanks for joining me live. I would not be able to do this without you. I always wonder every time I turn on Socrative, and I'm hoping someone's going to join, because me talking to myself probably not quite as interesting. Thanks for joining us this month. We'll see you next month on the study group. Thanks, everyone. My. It's a lot of talking. I really am completely out of sorts with the time change. Why is this so difficult for me? I don't know. I'm a night owl. I like to stay up till 2 in the morning-ish. And it's just something that I like to work at night. I like to do things at night. I hate the mornings. I hate morning things. I hate getting up early and going to morning things that morning people are at. Some of you on the chat room, you're morning people, more power to you. Solidarity, whatever. Not really so much solidarity, because I'm sitting there in the morning with the coffee, like, but you folks are talking, you're laughing. I don't understand it. I don't know how that works. It's not in my DNA. I can't do it. And obviously you see that with some of the writings on the study group. Oh, anyway, let's get the phone line set up, shall we? You don't have to call in. I'm looking at the chat room as well. You're welcome to put questions into the chat. It's a very easy way to do it. I'm going to call in to this call-in studio. I should probably turn things on and start a show. You're welcome for me doing that. And I would do that. I would if I could find the button I'm supposed to click to be able to do exactly that. But I can't, because my Skype is missing on my screen. Isn't this fun? We do this part. Here it is. I'm going to turn this down so you don't hear that. I will. I have to think about this as I'm doing it, or I will get it wrong. Welcome. See, that's how I know it works, because she says welcome. Phone lines. Let's. I've got a phone line here. There we go. If you want to call in and talk live for some unknown reason, you can call me at 855-785-RJ45. If you're calling on Skype, it's a free call on Skype with +1 855-785-7545. And it costs nothing to do that. How do we do it? I don't know, but it just does that. So it's one of those things. And you'll be on hold. You'll hear a little beeping noise when I pick up the line, and being able to get through those pieces. It's not as easy as it looks on my side. There's nobody screening my calls. For example, we can instantly go to the 228 area code and talk to whoever is there. Hi, caller. What's your name?
Oh, hey. My name's Noel.
Hey, Noel. See, you got in early. You got to be fast.
Yes.
Tell me a story. What's your question?
Does banner grabbing tie in with Xmas attack?
Oh, so this is one that comes in handy. And I guess those are obviously two very different things for those that are sort of watching on the stream. You have different ways that you can gather intel from devices. And one of the most common ways to do this is with banner grabbing. If you were to telnet into a server, if you go to SSH into a device, it presents you with message on the screen and usually says, this site is protected, unauthorized access is not allowed, and there's usually even some type of information about what service is running on that. It could tell you the exact web service that's running. Maybe it's running Nginx, maybe it's running Apache, maybe it's running Microsoft Internet Information Service. And by just finding out that information, you now have more intel about what you're connecting to. Oh, they're running Microsoft Internet Information Server. I know of a number of attacks that work on Internet Information Server. Let's see if this machine is patched. I don't have to run my attacks that are set up for Nginx or for Apache, because they're not going to work on this device. So you can see how having that banner grabbing can really help you with the intelligence part of this. So the other part you asked about was a Christmas tree attack, was the Xmas attack. A Christmas tree attack is the attack itself. It's you performing an attack that modifies the protocol, the IP protocol itself, and changes up a number of the bits that are inside of the IP protocol to hopefully get this particular device to provide you with access that you would not normally have. Now, the Christmas tree attack is a really old attack. It is a well-known and well-oiled attack. It's an old one. It's a legacy attack, and hardly anything is going to allow a Christmas tree attack. In fact, most firewalls, most intrusion prevention systems, anything that is looking for a malicious activity will find a Christmas tree attack by default. But it's a good thing to think about. It's a good knowledge to have, because the way that a Christmas tree attack is very similar to other protocol-based attacks as well. But if I had to put them into different categories, I would say that your banner grabbing is more of intel and gathering the information, whereas a Christmas tree attack is the actual attack itself. You're now going after a device and trying to get access that you would not normally have if you weren't running that particular attack. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Now, is this as you're going through your Security Plus stuff, are you getting into more of the banner grabbing details? Have you performed any of these attacks on your own systems yet?
No, I haven't.
One thing you can use for this, Nmap does a great job at performing Christmas tree attacks and at least giving you feedback on how a system is performing to that. That's a very easy way to do that. It can also do a bit of banner grabbing behind the scenes. It does something called a service version inspection, service versioning. It can, with a special, I think it's -SV, when you're running Nmap, will not only tell you the ports that are open on a device, but if it finds a port that's open, it will start going through whatever the services are on that device to figure out what's running there. Is it Nginx? Is it Apache? Is it Internet Information Server? And it presents you with the banner that it found. So it's a great way to see how the banner grabbing capability might work by using something simple like Nmap that you can run on practically any operating system. Be a great thing to try. So have a look at that, Noel, as well. It'd be interesting to go through. It's a lot of fun, I think, playing around with Nmap in general.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for calling. I wrote a book on Nmap back in the day. It's a little bit dated now. It's not for sale anymore. But it's something that I went through every single scan in Nmap and documented how it worked, documented the protocols that were in use, documented everything about Nmap. I did packet captures and showed the packet capture. It's an amazing application. I got a chance to meet Fyodor, who manages and wrote a good part of Nmap. A fantastic utility, and obviously used quite a bit in security. In fact, if you're very familiar with Nmap, you can do so many things in the IT security space that other people just have no idea how all of this works together. It's an amazing application that is so deep. You don't even realize how deep it is. I thought I was going to write like a 2-page article for a website. I ended up writing a 250-page book. That's how deep it is, and it's a remarkable application. And continues to be. Fyodor has his own Nmap book that he has released. I highly recommend his book. It's a fantastic book. The things that he has seen. Very interesting. In the chat room, let's go to a question in the chat room real quick. Before I do that, let's check and make sure nobody's stuck on hold for those. UTMs. This is a type of technology that is near and dear to my heart. Since I'm I have my past experiences. I've worked a lot with next generation firewalls, which have effectively replaced UTMs. Unified Threat Management is what UTM is. It is what we called effectively the Frankenstein of security devices. So imagine you had, this is typically how this works. You have a company that makes a firewall, which is great. Traditional firewalls can allow or disallow traffic based on TCP port number and IP address. We know about that. So we have this firewall that's there, but we need more. Wouldn't it be great if on this firewall we could put an intrusion prevention system on the same box? That would be great. The problem is the people who manufacture the firewalls are often different than the people that manufacture the intrusion prevention systems, or they are separate systems entirely. But that's okay. We'll bolt it onto the top. So now it's going through a firewall engine, then we send it through a UTM engine. Well, it'd be nice if we had a URL filter too. What if I could restrict access to where people are going on the internet on my firewall? Makes perfect sense. The firewall's in the right place. So we'll bolt on to this a URL filtering mechanism that can filter either based on specific URLs or broad categories of URLs like shopping or firearms or entertainment or movies or streaming video. Okay, so now when traffic goes through, it goes through Firewall engine, then it goes through my IPS engine, then it goes through URL filtering engine, and finally comes out the other side. But wouldn't it be nice if we could scan for viruses? Wouldn't it be great if we could look for malicious code that is trying to get down to our machine so we could stop all of the bad code before it even gets down to our systems? We could block, for instance, all of these folks that are trying to send us the malware that's encrypting our files and is requiring us to send them money. So that's a great way to do it too. So now I could take an antivirus scanner or a network-based virus scanner, bolt that onto the top of this device. So now the data goes through a firewall, then it passes through an IPS engine, then it goes through a URL filtering engine, then it goes through an antivirus engine, and finally out the other side. Whew. Now, what if I could look for some type of information within the packets themselves that would be sensitive information? What if I could scan for social security numbers? What if I could scan for credit card numbers? What if I could prevent some healthcare information from going out of the device? So I'll put onto this a type of protection for privacy, some type of additional filtering on top of that. Very common to see PII filtering and being able to work through the pieces of this. It's one where you run into this all the time on people's systems and being able to prevent these from going through. So now I've got an engine for my firewall and my IPS and my URL filter and my antivirus and my security prevention for the different text or security numbers or healthcare information, whatever it happens to be. You have all of these layers. You've created this Frankenstein of a box. And interestingly enough, each one of those engines is often from a different company. So none of those engines talk to each other. They are all just separate things that are running, and your poor packet is going through all of these separate engines before they ever spit out the other side. That's a UTM. That is a unified threat management device. And back when all we had was UTMs, that was great because that's the best you could do. Yes, it slowed down the systems. Yes, the more things you turned on, the slower it got. Yes, it was not very good for high-speed networks. And yes, none of these systems worked with each other. There was no unified management of the device. It was all separate systems that you had to individually configure, but it's the best we had. That is an old technology that has been rapidly phased out, and instead we're putting in next-generation firewalls. Next-generation firewalls are, some people still call them UTMs, but they're not UTMs. Next-generation firewalls are devices that have a single pass as the traffic is going through. Ideally, on the really good ones, the traffic goes through in a single pass, and in that single pass, the technology is able to do firewalling, IPS, intrusion prevention, network-based antivirus, able to identify information within the data itself, and many other capabilities as it goes through the firewall at multi-gigabit speeds. That's today's security technologies. That's what's here now. It's been out for many, many, many years. It's a mature technology. And if you're putting a firewall into your organization, you're putting in one of these new firewalls today. Most people, I think, have swapped out their firewalls for these newer technologies, but because not just technologically they're old and outdated, they're difficult to manage. You see fewer and fewer people using traditional UTMs as being able to do that. So that's where that's a very long answer for what is a UTM, isn't it? That's pretty involved, but that's really what the differences are. These days, next generation firewalls is where everything is at, and remarkable technologies to be able to work through those. One of the things you do run into on the Security Plus exam, this has come up already in the chat room, it came up yesterday, is the performance-based questions. And these are an enormous challenge because you don't know what you're going to get. Obviously, if you knew everything that's in the exam objectives, you're going to be fine. But if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, and you've never taken, or you don't know what the screen is going to be like, you certainly don't know what the performance-based questions might look like, CompTIA has a video on their YouTube page called Taking a CompTIA Exam. I searched for CompTIA exam experience. It was the first video that came up. The actual video name is Taking a CompTIA Exam. There, it's from the CompTIA website. And they go through exactly the way the exam looks on the screen. It's a great thing to go through if you've never taken one of these exams, because a lot of the stress you have going in, you have to know everything, and then you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to see. It's the fear of the unknown. So they show you exactly what the screens look like and take you through the entire process. And they'll tell you what's on the exam. Well, here's what's on the exam. Let's speed this up. Tells you all the different navigation arrows. You've probably seen this speed up as you've gone through my videos. So now we're going twice as fast. Usually don't get a calculator in your CompTIA exams. I don't know why they put this on here. You rarely see one of those, but you can flag questions. You can go to a single screen that shows you everything that you've answered, shows you what you haven't answered, breaks them all down, takes you through the different question types. So these are what they call really performance-based questions. There's multiple response, multiple choice, fill in the blank. We did one of those today. There is matching. So you have to drag and drop some things around the screen. This works most of the time. Sometimes there's a button you click and it pops open an image. So you have to answer the question based on the image that you see on the screen. And then I guess performance-based questions, they're calling one where you pop open and you're given a command prompt. There aren't any command prompts you need to know on the CompTIA Security Plus exam. Most of those would probably be on the Network Plus or the A Plus, because there aren't any command line commands you need to know for the A Plus exam. That's a great video to look at because it does give you that feel for what you'll run into from a CompTIA perspective. And that's one that really does, I think, makes you feel better before you walk in. You should gather as much information as you can about the process. And that's why I tell people, understand the environment you're going to be clicking on. Make sure you understand the review screen. Make sure you answer all the questions. You're not penalized if you get a question wrong. And by that, I mean, if you answer a question wrong, it doesn't count against you. If you leave it blank, it's the same as if you got it wrong. So at least try to answer it, because there's a chance you could get it right and you'll get points for doing that. That's how we believe it works for the CompTIA exams. Obviously, CompTIA doesn't share their process for grading. That's why they make it so hard to figure out. You'll notice it's a scale between 100 and 900. And we believe every question's worth a different number of points. And we don't know exactly how they grade it. And that's by design. They don't want you to know. Otherwise, they would tell us. They want it to be something that you're focusing more on the content and less on how many questions you're going to be getting right or wrong. For better or worse, that tends to be how their exam works. So that should give you an idea of those pieces. Make sure you have a look at that video. It's a very good video on working through those pieces. Let's go through some of the questions you've sent me this week and going through those pieces. Let me click a few things on my screen. Okay. First question is probably one of the most common ones, and you'll find it also written in my frequently asked questions that you can find at professormesser.com/FAQ. Got a number of questions there for you to go through. This frequently asked question is, do you think by only watching these videos I can pass the exam, or do I need something else? Do I need to order a book? What else can I do? Never use any single resource for an industry certification exam. I've created my videos to address every single topic that's on the CompTIA exam objectives. People have only watched my videos and taken the exams. These are people I'm assuming have some experience in the industry. I don't recommend that, though. Why would you not get a book? Get a book. They're relatively inexpensive, and they provide you with much more information than any video could ever provide, because a book, you're able to fit a lot more data. It's a different way to learn. And so you can fit data onto a book in a different way than you can put information into a video. Even with the comprehensive view of the videos, you'll find that having a book and reading the information a different way, having it presented to you differently, helps you understand it better. Even if you're somebody who doesn't like to read a book, maybe you watch the video and then you reference the book on the information you just watched in the video just to reinforce that. I think it's really important. So you could pass your exam by watching these videos only. I just don't know why you do that. Don't do that. Go get a good book and go through that. I use the GTS Learning book to make my videos. In fact, they've embedded my videos in their book. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, how they do that. So they're able to take the videos. There's a QR code. You can either click on the book if it's an electronic form or scan the QR code and be able to do that there as well. Very easy to make that happen. Let's go through another question that you've sent in. Home networks, blah, blah, blah. Let's go through this list. I should probably greenlight some of these before the call. We went through some of the PKI stuff today. A lot of people ask about encryption and PKI. We went through a couple of those today. Certainly with the key escrow was an important concept to remember as well. That's absolutely in your exam objectives. Is there a disadvantage to completing the Security Plus before taking the Network Plus? Well, from a knowledge perspective, there's not really a disadvantage to doing that, although some of the content from the Network Plus is also contained in the Security Plus. There's a little bit of overlap there. The Venn diagram there, not entirely overlapping, but a little bit of it's there. Perhaps the more advantage of doing it the other direction, where you take the Network Plus first and then the Security Plus, is that the Security Plus exam will renew the Network Plus, but the Network Plus will not renew the Security Plus. So if you take the Network Plus and then a year later you take and pass the Security Plus, you've now renewed your Network Plus for another 3 years, plus you have your Security Plus for 3 years. If you do it in reverse and you take your Security Plus and pass that, and a year later you take your Network Plus, well, then your Security Plus is not renewed. So your Security Plus is only good for another 2 years. Your Network Plus is good for 3 years. So that's one of the things you might want to consider when you're trying to decide to take both. You might want to take Network Plus first because it just makes more sense from a little bit from a content perspective and much more from a renewal perspective and being able to have that there. Let's take a sip. Very nice. Again, not enough coffee available to resolve the change in the time zones. It's not going to work for me. Let's go through into some more questions we have here. There are a lot of people this week. We talked about VLANs. Talked about in the chat room. Some people are asking about VLANs in the questions that you're sending to me. You should absolutely understand the concept of VLANs, especially as it applies to security. Configuring and being able to partition out separate parts of a switch into their own little worlds are an important concept with security. Partitioning and segmenting the network in general is an incredibly important part of IT security. And it's one where you're using VLANs, you're using firewalls, you're using routers to make all of those things happen. And I often tell people to think of VLANs as you're carving out certain ports on the switch into their own world. You can conceptualize this in your mind as if you had completely physical separate switches and you are plugging individuals into completely separate switches that were not connected to each other. That's exactly how VLANs work, is you are segmenting and carving them out into their own little world. The only way VLANs can, of course, talk to other VLANs is if you route between those VLANs. That's the idea, is you want to have some way to segment out all of this so that people can't communicate back and forth and being able to have that traffic there. I think that comes in handy too if you're someone who is trying to manage who gets where on the network. That's one way to manage it. And VLANs is a great way to do network segmentation along with these other technologies you might run into. Let's go back to the phones, to the 507 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, I'm Kyle.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for holding. What can we do for you?
Hey, I'm just really interested in being part of this conversation. I noticed that the topic is Security Plus.
It is.
Something I'm very interested in learning about. Right now, I'm currently studying for the second half of my A+ certification. I've got the date set for March 23rd, and I'm going to go in there and hopefully pass with flying colors.
Now, are you taking both your 90? Are you taking the 800 series or the 900 series first?
Actually, it was the 80, the 220 802 is what I have left.
Okay.
And I'm not sure the difference between 800 and 900.
Well, obviously, the CompTIA renews or updates their certifications every 3 years. The 900 series is the one they just released a number of months ago. Right now, of course, as you know, you can take both of those, either the 800 or the 900 at the same time, and it doesn't matter which series you take. You get exactly the same A+ certification at the end. And if you've already taken the 801, you're pretty much locked in. You have to take the 802. You can't jump ahead and take the 902. You have to take the pair of them that were created together with each other. And it's good that you're taking it now because obviously the 800 series exams are retiring on June the 30th. And if you don't pass the 802 before then, you'll have to start over with the 900 series and go back and have to take both of those exams. So your timing is very good with the 802, I think.
All right, that sounds great. Yes, I'm excited to take it. And so you guys taking Network Plus next, huh?
I generally do, and let me tell you why. Because I think, as someone who comes from an environment where I have, I managed workstations. In IT, I kind of started with desktop management, operating systems, and eventually file servers. And then I moved into more server administration, working with networks along those lines, and then went into just detailed networking, did a ton of networking after that. And eventually that migrated into security. And we're talking about a 20 or 25 year span where I kind of went from one to the other. And that was the evolution that I had, or the migration that I had. But what I found is the knowledge of networking that I had was something that touched everything in IT. If someone was doing database management, somebody was working in a data center, if someone was managing file servers or web servers or internet connections, or they were building out an application, all of this touched the network, obviously. So knowing how the network operated and all of the different components of the network, and for me, understanding the protocols underneath the surface and being able to really watch a protocol analyzer and read how that was working was incredibly useful. And it's been a set of skills I've been able to apply to everything that I've done with technology, bar none. I mean, everything that I've touched, even what I do now, I make videos and put them on the internet, but I have all of these different components that are on my network. There's the streaming video we're doing right now, for example. Understanding how the network works will help you regardless of what you end up doing in IT. So that's why I generally will recommend get a good foundation in networking, because from there you can go anywhere and do anything. It's a normal next hop. And that's really why I say that.
Okay, I have one more quick question.
Sure.
I actually went to school, a 2-year degree, associate's degree for network administration and technology.
Great.
And that was really my first, that's where I started my computer business, computer learning, and I found it really interesting. But now I find myself not really much of a network professional, and I was advised to just kind of start with the basic certifications and get the A+. So therefore, I feel like I was kind of trained in the network aspects, but now I'm trying to find a way to get a help desk job, and it's a little frustrating because I wasn't trained in doing help desk work in school. So,
well, the good part, and the thing I just mentioned, is that no matter what you now decide to do, and there's so many things you can do in IT, no matter what you decide to do, your knowledge of what you've learned with the network will serve you well. In fact, when my first job really in IT was working kind of as a remote break fix guy, where I went to remote locations to do that. And my first corporate job was on the help desk. And I think it's a great place to start because it gives you a broad perspective of different applications, different services, different operating systems, all the different things you would find in a particular organization. So one advantage you're going to have, especially if you're starting out in IT, which very commonly is with a help desk, is that you have a great foundation of knowledge underneath you, and you'll be able to bounce to whatever the next thing is going to be. I never thought, back when I started on the corporate help desk and doing some basic corporate training classes, that it would migrate into a systems engineer job where I was seeing the world, literally flying around the world and showing people a product. How is that even a job? And yet that's what I ended up doing for a living. And I would have never guessed it when I started working on a help desk and helping people learn how to log into the mainframe. That seems light years different from where it ended up. But of course, when I started, and this will be the same for you, when I started with the help desk, there was no internet. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no LinkedIn. There were none of these things. And of course, 20 years from now, the entire segment, this entire thing that we do on the internet is also going to be very different. So it really doesn't even matter. How's this for something to say? It doesn't matter what you choose now, because it's going to be different in even 5-10 years from now. You're never going to know where you end up. My secret that I tell people is just find what you enjoy doing. And when you find that thing, there's always technology that's based on that. It doesn't matter. If you like networking, you'll lean towards networking. You'll end up going down a network path. If you like security, you'll probably start on the network side. You'll lean to more the security side. If you like servers and databases, that'll probably where you bounce out of the help desk and where you end up going. So don't worry so much about here's where I am now. Think about what you like doing, and you'll find that wherever your path goes somehow manages to find its way around that particular set of technologies. It happens that way every time, I think, Kyle.
Awesome to hear. Thank you very much.
Good luck with your 802 and let us know how it goes.
All right, I will.
Thanks for calling. Take care.
Have a great day.
That's exciting. I like going for those certification exams. Comes in handy. Let's check those pieces and being able to go through those and understand those the details of those pieces. Let's go back to the phones. Phone lines. If I can find the link for the phone lines, let's go to the 228 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, Professor Messer, this is Noel again.
Hey, Noel. Welcome back.
I have a question. Audit logs, like the art and science of audit logs.
Yes.
There's so many devices I go, how do I know what to look for and do things? I need to figure out how to answer this. Ask us. Yeah, how do I audit logs in general?
In general, it is it's certainly not a general question because it's a very broad question, quite honestly. In the world of IT security, logs are an enormous piece of this. Most people think of IT security or think of security in general as someone who's doing penetration testing, and you're finding the ways that people are hacking in, or you found a hacker on your system and you're trying to figure out where he is and what he's doing, and you're in real time clicking firewall rules. No, we got through the firewall, like they do on NCIS and on the other television shows. But of course, it's nothing like that. The reality is you're setting policies and procedures. You're configuring applications to be able to pass through your firewall. And one thing that is universal is you will have a ton of log files to go through, an enormous amount. You thought you knew how many log files you have. No, you have many more than that. There are log files that are on the firewall, and those log files may be the people that are gain access or are denied access to certain resources. Maybe places where you have identified malicious software going through the network because you have an IPS on your firewall. It may be a set of URL information, so you know exactly what URLs people are visiting. Everybody is visiting, and what categorization of those URLs it happens to be. Imagine if you logged every URL that every person visited in your organization. That's what's happening on these enterprise devices that are in the core of your network. And you also have logs that are in all of your switches and all of your routers and all of your servers. All of those are enormous sets of logs. So there is a huge amount of data that is coming from a huge number of very diverse devices on your network. And you're generally consolidating all of this down to a central set of log storage devices. Usually it's your SIM, your security information management device, where all of these logs are, so that you can start parsing through and able to view these logs in a way that makes sense. Usually audit logs are on things like servers or switches or routers or a device that you're logging into. And your audit log is checking to see if somebody was gained access by providing the correct credentials, or somebody was denied access by providing the wrong credentials. I have an audit log on ProfessorMesser.com where people from all over the world are trying to hit my server, log in with the username and password, and try to brute force what the correct username and password might be on the server. If you have any service that's on the internet, there are people that are trying to figure out the username and password on that device all the time, every day, bar none. And so there's a set of logs I keep on my server where I can track this information and understand who's trying to gain access to my machine, what IP address are they coming from, what username did they try, what password did they try, and then I can see this information going through and I can understand who's trying to do that. Now, I also have systems on my servers that are automated that look at these audit logs, and they try to see if somebody does this. And if they try it a certain number of times within a certain time frame, I ban their IP address. Now they can't connect to me for 24 hours, for 48 hours, or whatever it happens to be. So it's a way to mitigate this brute force attack by finding and viewing my audit log, understanding who's trying to gain access, and then making a change to my security posture based on what I find in the audit log. That's one of the most common ways to use an audit log and take advantage of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're saying you mostly put it on your servers and also on the exterior part of your network?
Any place there is a device that you are logging into it. So there is an audit log certainly on a Microsoft web, on a web server, on a Microsoft file server, on a database server, on a router or a switch, because you're logging in with the management front end. There's some type of log on that device that's auditing the access of that. There's audit logs on a Radius server. Radius servers, that's all they do is authenticate people. So obviously there's going to be an audit log on those as well. If you're putting in a username and a password, there's no doubt an audit log on that device as well. You take this to the next level, and then you also have audit logs that can track everything you do on a device. This is very common to see on firewalls, in fact, because firewalls are extremely secure devices, and you want to maintain the security of those devices. If somebody makes a change, you want to know exactly what they changed. So a lot of the firewalls I used to work with would put in the audit log that you logged in, and then everything you clicked, everything you changed, every part of a rule you modified, it also added that to the audit log as well. Very common to see. And it's one that becomes extremely important whenever you're trying to figure out the details of what's going on. It's nice to be able, I could rewind now and go back in time and see who made that change. What did they change when they logged in? Oh, they logged in at this date and time. Here's exactly what they clicked. Here's exactly what they touched. And now you have a log that tells you exactly what they did whenever they connected to that device. That's one of the most common ways to use an audit log, I think.
Oh, okay. So when you're talking about all these different audit log locations, how do you know what is right and what is wrong? Is there like some sort of baseline? Or
that is your biggest challenge as a security professional, is being able to find in the log when something is not normal. This is one where usually you get accustomed to this after a while of seeing what a normal login looks like, what a normal login doesn't. And in the case of things like Microsoft, they have a set of codes associated with these events that can tell you, for instance, when somebody had an incorrect login, and there's a particular code. So you can search for that code to show you everybody who might have had an incorrect login during that time. Every device is different. Every device logs things in a different way. Every device, and not just a different way, a dramatically different way. So what you're looking for in the log will depend entirely on the device you're examining, and it will determine on how they're providing these logs to you. So it's really something where you have to go back to the manufacturer of the device or the operating system or the software you're using and find out what is normal, what is abnormal, so that then you can find that in the log. We're listening in now.
okay.
Hopefully that helps you a little bit, give you some concept. And you should go into your Microsoft Windows machine that you have right now, or your Linux device, or whatever you're running. Go to the event log and look at these security events. You'll be surprised the ton of information that's inside there. It's a great way to get a feel for what people are looking for in an audit log.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Good luck with that. There's an entire business, an entire industry built around log management. And whenever I start looking at SIMs, that is one that comes in. It's an enormous industry. When I say a SIM, I'm referring to an SIEM, a security information and event management tool. I'm trying to find a link here that can give you a feel for what some of these might look like. So here's a very common one, in fact. This is one with kind of a cool name, Logarithm. Logarithm is one that is a SIM. It is gathering all of these log files and intelligence from all of these different devices and providing you with a single view of this data on the screen. A lot of them have these fancy graphics, but a lot of people rely on text-based reports. I've never been to this website. Watch logarithm in action. Maybe they have a video or a demo or something. Well, I don't want to sign up for a demo, so we're not going to do that. This is one. Another very common one is Splunk. That's one I've used a lot. Let me find their website. And it's spelled just like it sounds, Splunk. I think I loaded up Splunk on my system and took some screenshots for mine. They have tons of products out there. Let's look at their Splunk Enterprise. They probably got some graphics here that show some of these pieces. Don't you love a website that has nothing of what I'm looking for? Here we go. We've got a little video. Let's see. Hi, welcome to Splunk. They actually have a nicer website than this. I was hoping to find. Here's what a Splunk looks like. I told you that it doesn't have a lot of graphics. Here's one. Here's sort of a screen that you might see in Splunk. They got some nice graphics that you can create. They also have a lot of log files that it will create as well in here. That's what you do with a SIEM. Now imagine if you have all of this data in one place. You've got data from your routers, your switches, your firewalls, your servers, and you're trying to find a security event that occurs. I will be able to track a notification in my firewall. What server did they hit? Are there any logs associated with that event in my server? Bring them all back to one view and show it to me on the screen. That's what the benefit of the security log file management is with these SIEMs. Huge visibility and being able to see that. And you're right. Whenever somebody tries to log in to my servers with the wrong username and password, I see the username, but obviously I don't see the exact password that they sent. I see the hash that is sent to me for that. So I can see the hash, and that gives me a feel for, are they trying the same hash, the same word over and over, even if I don't know what word they're trying. But I can certainly see what accounts they're trying to log into when they're sending that. Well played, by the way. Well done with that one, being able to work through those pieces. Let's go back to some of the questions you folks have sent me in my big spreadsheet. And some of those, scroll. There was some questions on here. Is the test hard? Yes, the test is hard. That was an easy one. Thanks for your question. One of the things I do, somebody asking about Nmap. We talked a little bit about that here. Someone asked about configuring Snort. Snort is an open source. I guess it's still open source. Intrusion detection. I guess there's some intrusion prevention capabilities in it now. But it's one you can download, load on a machine. There's probably an open or a live CD version of this that you can just start up and get running and run your traffic through and do your own intrusion prevention or intrusion detection through Snort. It's a very common open source freebie kind of solution. They also have a solution you could purchase from them that gives you faster signatures and additional capabilities. Configuring Snort and getting it running, though, is not entirely necessary for the exam. It's useful to know what an IPS is, what the difference is between an IPS and an IDS. You should understand what the types of signatures are that you would expect to see in an IPS. For example, an IPS is designed to show you any known vulnerabilities that can be identified across the network. These vulnerabilities are things like buffer overflows, database injections, or anything else that you can identify as it's going over the network. An IPS is, usually there's also additional capabilities on an IPS that may be able to find brute force attacks or some kind of other repetitive attack that may be coming across. They can find things like someone who's using a denial of service. You can see denial of service attacks on an IPS, but that's very different, for instance, than what you might see in a firewall, which is very different than what you might see on an antivirus software that's on your computer. And you should absolutely know the difference between all of those and certainly all of those devices, being able to run through those. There is constant challenges with security on my servers. I have a utility, an application that blocks devices from coming to my machine whenever I find one of these folks trying to log in. I use a very common open source tool called fail2ban, fail number 2 ban. If somebody tries to log into my machine over and over, after a very small number of tries, fail to ban kicks in, bans them, and then it gives me information about who did that. It sends me an email that says, here's the IP address that tried to log into your account, that tried to brute force your machine. Here is the way they were trying to brute force it. And then it does a who is on the IP address and shows me, here's who owns that IP, which kind of gives me an idea of where it's coming from. Is it in the United States? Is an IP address associated with a particular ISP? Is it associated with a particular company? So I can get a feel for where this particular attack is at least coming from an IP perspective. That's not a perfect idea of really where the IP attack is coming from, but it gives me an overview anyway of what some of those things are. It certainly helps me understand more about the number of attacks I'm getting, and it allows me, of course, to stop those from coming into my machine, because most of the time they're automated anyway. All of these attacks that are coming through are just an automated system that's trying to break into your system, trying to find a door. When it finds a door, it'll ring a bell, and then the human can come over and take it over from there. On my system, they don't get very far. They're banned almost immediately. They're trying usernames that don't even exist on my machine. I've changed my usernames for the administrative login. Some, like my root login, you cannot log into root interactively, so it doesn't help you anyway. They're trying usernames that they'll never be able to gain the password for because I restrict access with that particular login, which every good web server administrator should. So it's a very common way to take advantage of those log files and have them work for you where you don't even have to do anything. I never think about it. Just automatically does it behind the scenes. It's automatically looking at my logs. It's automatically banning people, and I never have to worry about the pieces of it. It's a beautiful thing, really. I highly recommend that. If you have a server, failed to ban's been awesome in being able to work through those pieces and stop those from coming in. And I've got a pretty complex, it's not complex. It's just a relatively common way to connect all these devices together, but it's not simply you talking to a server. Around the world, I have caching devices, depending on where you are in the world, that cache my information and provide you with a local copy of my web server. So already, technically that's a reverse proxy. So you're first hitting a reverse proxy or never hitting my server directly. The reverse proxies around the world are hitting a central load balancer back where my servers happen to be. Then the load balancer is then taking the load and sending it off to multiple web servers. So the web server you talk to today, you may be talking to a completely different web server tomorrow, but it's still my web servers contain exactly the same information. You see the same pages. And of course, there's a separate database server behind the scenes. So really, you've gone through a couple of hops before you even got down to my computers. You never really see my IP address from the rest of the world. You see the reverse proxy's IP address. So although that is not necessarily a security tool, it's more of security through obscurity, it helps that you don't know what the IP address is. Could you get the IP address? Yes, you could. There are ways to do that. They're not easy ways to do that. There's no public ways to do that. You'd have to be very sneaky about how you got the ultimate IP address from my server. But even then, a lot of it's private addresses behind the scenes you'd have to NAT to get. It's very interesting how all of that works together. It's a series of things, but all of these add a layer of security and add a certain layer of protection for the services that I'm providing. It's really worth looking at. I think there's a couple of articles on doing this that are worth reading. If you're planning to set up a server on the internet, you never just want to give people direct access to the server. Make sure they hop through a couple of devices before coming to you. And usually those couple of devices that they're hopping through provide you with some additional features. For example, the fact that I have distributed proxies around the world, of course, are providing faster access for my users, but I can also set up a centralized management for all those devices. So if I needed to block an IP address, I say, please block this IP address, and it blocks it anywhere in the world. I can block based on country. For instance, I block all of China. Nobody in China needs to come to my website, and the people that are in China that try to come to my website probably should not be coming to my website. They're there for no good. So I block the entire IP range that has been previously assigned to China. So already I'm blocking things out that way. It's a very common thing to do in the United States, as a matter of fact. So there's a couple of things I can use by taking advantage of the security features on those reverse proxies to prevent now access in. And of course, on those reverse proxies, I have audit logs. So I can see who's trying to access my servers. I can see if it's an automated system. You may find that if you're trying to do something over and over on my server, it might think that you are a bot or that you're a computer, and it may prompt you to put in a code so that you can continue as a human being on my server. It's just another layer of protection that's there because I have that reverse proxy in place. One of those nice things to have there if you're ever trying to add additional layers of security. And for the folks that send the message like, how do we layer these things together? That's a perfect way to do it. Very common way to do it, in fact. And of course, on my web server itself are a series of security features that I've enabled with the applications that I use, so that even if you got all the way to my server, you still have to get through another set of hurdles to get to the actual data. I think that's probably my background in IT security that takes me down that road, and having that there. I want if you're going to an encrypted page on my site, it is encrypted from your machine all the way down to my machine with my certificate, not someone else's. So this is not a case where someone else might be able to get into that data, which is commonly done with reverse proxies. It's my certificate on the reverse proxy. I've already thought about these things. I want this experience to be as available and as secure as possible, and that's the way I set up my servers to be able to do that. Well, that brings us to the end. I can tell we're at the end of the second hour because my voice does this. At the end of the second hour, I can't go on any longer. But that, I think, has been a good day of a Security Plus study group. I want to thank everybody for joining us again on the Security Plus study group. I really could not do this without your help. All of the questions you send in, stop in the chat room throughout the month. You ask questions there. I make notes. The emails you send to me, I make notes. If you're someone who has sent in the continuing education unit email to me, you can send that in at any time. If you're watching on the replay, you can send that in on the replay as well. I will be glad to send those to you and get them off to you. Make sure you do that. I'll probably send the next set off today, so you get your hands on those before we're finished with the business day today. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you want to join in for any of my Security Plus study groups, our next one will be at the beginning of April. So we're done for the month of March. Feel free to check the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/calendar to find out when the next one of those will be. And we will see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone.